Hey guys, Nathan here with another discussion video. This time moved into my new place at school. If we can even call online classes school, that is. But I've got a few more things to set up before I'm done with the room, but it's been a while since I uploaded a video and I want to talk about something I've had on my mind for a while, which is what is the best typing in Pokemon? And more importantly, what does asking this question tell us about the game itself? So when I first decided I wanted to do this video, I had a couple of ideas for it. And the main one was just to go to a basic tier list site like this and just rank some types and stuff like that, right? And do something to the effect of like, okay, bug types are bad because they're weak to stealth rocks and they're resistant by a bunch of things, and dark types are good because they do this and that and what have you. But the problem was there's all these qualifying statements that would kind of make that impossible to do very accurately or even succinctly. For example, if we're talking about dark types, are we talking about them in Sword and Shield, where stab knockoffs are these massive nukes that can't be stopped and nobody really wants to swap into freely? Or are we talking about Generation 5, where it was pretty much just used for pursuit and really just made you fodder for all the threatening fighting types that exist in that generation? So which is it? And so if we said, okay, it's only Sword and Shield, then we'd have to ourselves, is it like doubles or is it singles? Because if it's doubles, then do I have to worry about like multi-target moves like Dazzling Gleam that are going to attack to both sides, or is it singles where we can kind of swap around that sort of move more freely? And then if we narrow it down to just Sword and Shield singles, then we have to ask ourselves, is it overused, where I have to worry about maybe not so many dark types, there's really only one in the top 20 usage stats right now, or is it underused, where there's like 5 right in the top 10 in usage stats, just dominating the meta right now? Again, it's just, it changes depending on which metagame you're in. It can be found anywhere in this list depending on how you're asking the question, how you're forming it. So the point that I'm trying to get across here is that it's impossible to make a blanket statement that covers all possible Pokemon. There's always going to be some sort of subjective factors that shift it and make it less good depending on which metagame you find it in. For example, in most metagames, I think fighting types are amazing. They beat the steel types, they have access to some really powerful great moves, they resist stealth rocks on swap in, etc. But honestly, in Sword and Shield, I think they've taken a big step back with the proliferation of Toxapex and Clefable. There's all these ghost types wandering around that aren't affected by fighting type moves. Boots make that stealth rock resistance much more useful, and so on. I can go on for a little while now. So objectively, I don't think fighting types are any worse than usual. They're still great and all the qualities are still there on paper, but subjectively they just find themselves in a much less friendly and conducive environment for them, and they're just not as common nowadays. Now, what I've just said seems obvious, but I really think it's an important consideration and concept to keep in mind when you're talking about tiering and ranking Pokemon. Kyurem, for example, is a great demonstration of this. It's been a fringe OU pick for years, sitting in the rarely used ban list for much of its history, and yes, while it did get a big buff this generation with its new move Freeze Dry, it's also just had a much more welcoming metagame for it. Pokemon that destroyed it in Sun and Moon, like Mega Diancie, Keldeo, Mega Medicham, are really gone from the current overused tier, and Pokemon that has a great matchup against, like Hippowdon, Mandibuzz, and Amoonguss, are more common than ever before. And as a result, it's a menace that's almost impossible to swap into safely at all, regardless of its matchups. And on the flip side, or the flip turn, a perennial overuse threat like Keldeo finds itself in a really unfriendly metagame nowadays. It didn't get nerfed or anything, it just so happens that the Pokemon ruling the tier right now do really well against it and prevent it from kind of like showing its stuff and thriving like it used to. Now, I say all this to reinforce a point I made in a previous video. If you have a Pokemon that you really like and you want to build a team around it, their usage tier shouldn't be that big of a concern for you. There are tons of Pokemon out there that are on the cusp of breaking out because there's only a few things holding them back in the current meta. To bring up Keldeo again, sure, it's underused right now, but if we ever end up seeing a Toxapex ban, that can change in one day. Or you can handle that weakness yourself right now and pair Keldeo with a great wall breaker like Specs Magnezone to take advantage of Toxapexes and things like that, swapping in on your Keldeo too freely. And if you'll forgive a brief NFL football anecdote, it's kind of like how analysts every year tear their hair out trying to predict who the next breakout team is going to be. In 2016, the Eagles were last in their division, and then they won the Super Bowl the next year. Or the 49ers last year, who went from second worst in the league to second best. People look back now with hindsight and go, well, I guess it makes a lot of sense that they worked out that way. They were a really injured roster in previous years, and once they were healthy, they were just too good to not do really well. That sort of thinking of evaluating them based on their objective strength versus just the circumstances that they're playing in is how I try to look for sleeper Pokemon nowadays. Like maybe I'm browsing around and I think, damn, how the hell is Reuniclus rarely used again? Its stats are amazing, it's got Magic Guard, it hits as hard as Alakazam, it can sweep with Trick Room or setup sets, it shuts down Toxapex. All in all, it's pretty stacked, right? I'm sure it would do amazing in overused if not for all the dark and ghost types in tier right now. But then maybe I think, well, if I paired it with a Tyranitar, that helped to mitigate some of its weaknesses to ghost and dark, maybe do a bit better that way. And actually, Tyranitar has low speed too, so maybe you could take advantage of a Trick Room Reuniclus set as well. And Again, you can see how this sort of process is very organic and can lead to some cool teams that people wouldn't really consider otherwise. But we've been talking all this time and I haven't even addressed the topic of the best typing in Pokemon. Because again, I want to explore this idea of Pokemon that are objectively good and have these qualities that they haven't been able to show yet versus subjectively good Pokemon. Pokemon that are really just good due to the current circumstances of the metagame right now. It's a bit of a crazy tangent that I took to explain this, but I appreciate you sticking through it with me, and I hope that this maybe reframes the way that you consider Pokemon who you might otherwise call like good or bad, and realize there's a bit more nuance to it. Now, if people are still interested, I might still make a video on the best typing of Pokemon. I just have to be careful and preface it in advance with like this big, only talking about the best overused singles Pokemon in Sword and Shield, and then I can maybe talk about that typing. So let me know if you'd be interested in that sort of thing in the comments below. But otherwise, thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.